Tonight, police are trying to figure out who murdered a 19-year-old college student.
Mark Fisher's bullet-riddled body
was found on the streets of Brooklyn, New York.
Mark Fisher was young, he was tall, he was an up-and-coming football player at his university, and he came to the city for fun.
Mark Fisher was a kid from New Jersey, who lived in an affluent suburb. He went to Fairfield University in Connecticut.
He was a terrific student. He was a terrific athlete. He earned a scholarship to college.
And he's with his friends from college.
Started at some bars on the Upper East Side, did some bar hopping.
And by coincidence, they run into a girl he knows from school. And this girl named Angel has her friend Meredith with her. And Meredith and Mark look at each other, and immediately the little hearts come flying out of their eyes. It's crush at first sight.
Mark had come to the city with a large contingent of his friends, but once he met Meredith, he was very smitten with her. She was smitten with him.
And he gets separated from his friends, in part because he's entranced by this girl, Meredith. And sparks fly, and he follows her out of this bar and into this impromptu party that's happening in Brooklyn.
The clubs closed at maybe like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, so they all hopped in a cab and went to Brooklyn to hang out for the after party.
It's arguably the first time he's been alone in the city.
So going to a club in Manhattan and hanging out with people in New York City was a big deal. And then for the after party to be in Brooklyn, that's like a whole nother world for him.
There are indications early that Mark isn't ready for this kind of adventure. He runs out of money almost immediately. He loses his cell phone. He is a stranger in a strange land, and he doesn't speak the language.
It was in Brooklyn that something went terribly wrong.
It's not even a party, it's a gathering of kids who are trying to figure out what to do after the bars shut down. It's at the home of a neighborhood guy named John Giuca.
I was a social butterfly. I was very gregarious, and I was always talking to people, and I liked being in crowds.
Tell me your first impression of Mark Fisher.
To tell you the truth, he just had a personality that was likable. I thought he was cool, and that's it.
Was he intoxicated?
Yeah, he was drunk.
Were you?
Yes.
This was an impromptu party. This was not something that was planned. This was something that just happened.
Why was it decided to go to John Giuca's house?
His mom was away, and he had a big house. It was like the easy choice.
There was a few kids that got stranded in Manhattan and had no place to go. And he figured he'll bring them here to my house, get some beers.
Drinking.
I'm sure they were smoking also.
Smoking weed.
Yes.
And yet that impromptu party turned into perhaps one of the biggest mistakes of his life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
John Giuca is a Brooklyn kid, by all accounts, very smart. He had gone to John Jay College with aspirations of becoming a police officer. He had a part as an extra in a movie.
He's in School of Rock. You can't miss him. His head fills the screen for a moment.
There's the ticket tape.
I guess you could say he was a fairly charismatic young man. He did have a group of friends who looked up to him.
We used to call him Shady because he had bleached blonde hair, just like Eminem at the time.
So won't the real Slim Shady please stand up? Please stand up. Please stand up.
These kids are sitting around drinking, smoking weed. And Antonio Russo, a neighborhood kid.
He was known in the community for his stylish dreadlocks. He wore them for years.
Sort of known to cops in the area for some drug dealing, and came to the party.
He was a bit of a wild card. Boisterous, loud, always trying to prove himself. He loved to fight.
As he got older, he became more of a loose cannon.
He was one of those guys that, you can have him over, have a good time, until something pops off. He's gonna punch you in the face.
Just a young kid, I guess, like knucklehead.
Was there any tension between Antonio Russo and Mark Fisher that night?
No, not that I saw.
Russo calls him yarmulke. I guess it's supposed to be, thinks he's Jewish.
Somebody said the night of the party that he called Mark Fisher yarmulke.
Well, he was always a jokester, and he would just say random stupid things like that, but I didn't catch that night. But I'm not surprised that he would have said something like that.
You have the idea that Mark Fisher, who was very tall, was very handsome, was perhaps attracting a little bit too much female attention.
There wasn't any jealousy or rivalry?
No, I wasn't attracted to Meredith at all.
And there wasn't like an alpha male thing going on?
No, not one bit. We were drunk and happy, actually.
And it's said that at one point he ticks off some of the people who are in the house by sitting on a table.
And one of the other partygoers says, hey, in Brooklyn we sit in chairs.
I'm the one who told him that, hey, don't sit on the table, you're gonna break it. It was like literally just like all glass table, like sit on the couch. He said, okay, but that was it. It wasn't a confrontation. I didn't say it to him like in a confrontational way.
In Brooklyn, like in a lot of cities, it's all about respect. And sitting on one's table versus a chair could easily be construed as being disrespectful.
After that, tensions are a little bit higher.
What about this idea that, oh, he was a freeloader and there was some anger that he was drinking and doing stuff without paying for it?
I wasn't even thinking about money at the time. If I was worried about that, I wouldn't have invited people to my house.
The night finally comes to an end.
At what time did you leave? Do you remember?
Anywhere from like 5:15 to 5:30. When I left, I started feeling like kind of like the fifth wheel, I guess. So I was like, all right, I'm out of here,
Sometime around dawn, John Giuca says he basically kicked Mark Fisher out of the house.
Night's over, party's over, to get out.
Mark Fisher heads out into the Brooklyn dawn, and he doesn't know that he only has minutes to live.
And he's next seen dead.
Tonight, police are trying to figure out who murdered a 19-year-old college student.
Mark Fisher's bullet-riddled body was found dumped
on the streets of Brooklyn, New York.
He was shot 5 times, and he was dumped right there in front of a home.
Mark Fisher was young, he was tall, he was an up-and-coming football player at his university, and he came to the city for fun. He just wanted to have a good time, and he ends up dead in Brooklyn. And that's shocking to parents, and that's shocking to the good sensibilities of Americans everywhere.